Hello everyone, you're on the Scary Story channel. What I'm about to tell you is a story my grandfather shared with me. Something that happened to him when he was just a young boy. It's a tale that has been passed down in my family, and it still sends a shiver down my spine every time I think about it. My grandpa, let's call him Leo, grew up in a small, remote town in the mountains. Their house was old, built by his great-grandfather, and it had one of those deep, damp basements with a dirt floor. The kind of place you only went into if you absolutely had to. The air was always cold and smelled of wet earth and something else. Something faintly metallic and old. The only light came from a single bare bulb hanging from a wire, casting long dancing shadows that played tricks on your eyes. Leo was about 10 years old at the time. He was a curious kid, always exploring and getting into places he shouldn't. But the basement was one place he avoided. His mother had warned him countless times. "Don't play down there, Leo," she'd say, her voice stern. "It's not safe." He never questioned why. The unsettling feeling he got just standing at the top of the rickety wooden stairs was reason enough. One rainy afternoon, Leo was home alone. His parents had gone into the next town for supplies, and the storm had rolled in unexpectedly, trapping him indoors. Bored, he wandered through the quiet house. The rain drumming against the roof was the only sound. That is, until he heard something else. A faint, rhythmic sound. Scrape, scrape, scrape. It was coming from below, from the basement. His heart started to pound. He told himself it was just a house settling, or maybe a mouse, but the sound was too regular, too deliberate. Curiosity, that powerful and often foolish force in a 10-year-old boy, began to win over his fear. He crept to the basement door, cracked it open, and listened. The scraping sound was louder now, echoing up the stairs. It was a heavy sound, like something being dragged across the dirt floor. Against his better judgment, he pulled the string for the single light bulb, and a weak, yellow light flooded the top of the stairs. He took a deep breath and started to descend, each step creaking loudly under his small weight. The cold, musty air enveloped him. When his feet touched the damp earth of the floor, he paused, his eyes scanning the cluttered space. There were old wooden crates, forgotten furniture covered in white sheets like ghosts, and jars of preserves lining the shelves. Nothing seemed out of place. The scraping had stopped. "Hello?" he called out, his voice small and trembling. Only silence answered. He felt a bit silly. It must have been his imagination, fueled by the storm and the spooky old house. He was about to turn and run back up to the safety of the kitchen when his eyes caught something on the floor. Tracks. But they weren't footprints. They were two long parallel grooves carved into the dirt floor. They looked as if someone had dragged something incredibly heavy from the far dark corner of the basement, right to the center of the room. The tracks were deep, about an inch into the packed earth, and they were perfectly straight. What was strange was that they just stopped, right in the middle of the basement, with no indication of what had made them or where it had gone. Leo followed the tracks with his eyes back to their origin point. They started from a section of the wall that was just crumbling stone and earth. It was the oldest part of the foundation, a place he'd never paid much attention to before. He slowly walked over, his small boots making soft imprints in the dirt next to the strange grooves. As he got closer, he saw that the tracks didn't just start at the wall, they seemed to come out of it. In the dim light, he could just make out a dark opening, almost completely hidden by shadows and loose soil. It was a hole, about 3 feet wide and maybe 2 feet high. A cold dread washed over him. He had never seen that hole before. It looked like an animal's burrow, but far too large and clean. The edges were too perfect. The scraping sound, the tracks, they came from this hole. He knelt down, his curiosity getting the better of him once again. He peered into the darkness, but couldn't see anything. He reached out a hesitant hand, his fingers brushing against the cold, damp earth around the entrance, and then he felt it. The ground around the hole was smooth, almost polished, as if from constant use. Suddenly he heard the scraping sound again. This time it was coming from inside the hole. It was close, very close. Scrape, scrape. Leo scrambled backwards, his heart leaping into his throat. He fell onto his back in the dirt, crab walking away from the dark opening, his eyes wide with terror. He couldn't see what was making the noise, but he could feel a change in the air, a vibration in the ground beneath him. He didn't wait to see what would emerge. He spun around and sprinted for the stairs, not daring to look back. He flew up the wooden steps, 2 at a time, his breath catching in his throat in a sob. He slammed the basement door shut, fumbled with the old iron bolt, and slid it into place. He leaned against the door, panting, his whole body shaking. The scraping sound was gone. All he could hear was the rain and the frantic beating of his own heart. When his parents got home a couple of hours later, they found him huddled in a chair in the living room, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the basement door. He tried to tell them what he saw, the tracks, the hole, the sound. His father, a practical man, just sighed. "Leo, I've told you about letting your imagination run wild. It was just a storm." He went down to the basement to prove it. Leo waited at the top of the stairs, trembling, refusing to go down. A few minutes later, his father called up, his voice calm. "See? Nothing here. Just a couple of old planks that probably shifted." But when his father came back up, Leo saw something in his eyes. A flicker of something. Uncertainty? Fear? He closed the basement door and locked it without another word. And he didn't look at Leo for the rest of the evening. For weeks, Leo was haunted by what he saw. He had nightmares about the dark hole and the scraping sound. He refused to go anywhere near the basement door. One night, he was woken by a familiar sound. Scrape, scrape. It was faint, but it was there. It was coming from the basement. He lay in his bed, frozen with fear, listening as the sound continued for what felt like hours. Then it stopped. The next morning at breakfast, his mother was unusually quiet. She kept glancing nervously towards the basement door. "Did you hear anything last night, dear?" she asked his father in a low voice. His father just shook his head, a little too quickly. "Just the wind," he said, but he wouldn't meet her eyes. Life went on, as it does. Leo grew up, the memory of that day fading, but never entirely disappearing. He moved away, started his own family. The old house was eventually sold after his parents passed away. For years, the story of the tracks in the basement became just that. A spooky story my grandpa would tell us kids around a campfire. But the story doesn't end there. About 10 years ago, my grandpa got a call. It was from a historical society in his old hometown. The new owners of his childhood home had been doing some major renovations. They had decided to excavate the basement to pour a proper concrete foundation. The man from the society sounded hesitant on the phone. "Mr. Leo," he said, "we found something in your old basement, under the dirt floor." My grandpa felt a familiar coldness creep up his spine. The man continued, "We found an old... well, it looks like a coffin, but it's made of iron. It's ancient. And the strange thing is, the lid." "What about the lid?" my grandpa asked, his voice barely a whisper. There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Well, sir," the man said, "the inside of the lid is covered in deep scratches. Long, deep gouges in the iron. Like someone or something was trying to claw its way out over and over and over again." My grandpa didn't say anything for a long time. The man on the phone cleared his throat. "There's one more thing, sir. The coffin. It was empty." After that phone call, my grandpa never told the story again. He never explained what he thought it was, and we knew better than to ask. But I often think about it. I think about that old house, the dirt-floored basement, and the mysterious tracks that just stopped in the middle of the room. And I wonder, when my 10-year-old grandfather heard that scraping sound coming from the dark hole in the wall, what exactly was it that was dragging itself out into the open? And more importantly, after he ran, where did it go? Where did it... Thanks for listening. If you have a story you'd like to share, you know where to find me. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more scary stories. Stay safe and always check your basement.